Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. With the voice, Milt Thompson. Delivering the best of sports programming. Interviews with top celebrities. And the answer to the question, where are they now? And now, Milt Thompson, Playing for Keeps.
Good evening and welcome to Playing for Keeps. I am your host, the voice, Milt Thompson, here on WHMB Channel 40. You know, I really appreciate the kind of feedback we're getting for this show from some of my friends, colleagues, and some people that maybe not be my friends and colleagues, but they're getting what we promised. It's the top kind of sports programming that you can possibly find in our community. And I wanted to thank you so much for watching us every week. You know, we're kind of leading into weekends of sports on Fridays at 9 o'clock and going into a basketball show that you'll have hosted by our good friend Phil Eisenberger, and then they're going to go straight into what the IHSA produces, a game of the week here, and we'll have it in football and then basketball and all the other championships that they have, and you get a full lineup of IHSA sports right here on Channel 40. And guess what? As we're teasing today's show, speaking of the IHSAA, say that fast, folks. You try it. I can't do it. But we've got the new commissioner. Has already got a little more experience than a lot of new commissioners. But Paul Nadig is going to be in here and tell us a little bit about his background with the organization and him succeeding our old friend Bobby Cox and some new implementation of some different standards and rules. But we'll want to get some conversation in deep with Paul, and so appreciative of him taking the invitation in our first cluster of shows. You know, you've already heard from Ryan Vaughn of Sports Corporation. You've heard from Big Ray Tolbert and the Where Are They Now per once a month segment, and that was done well. You heard from Mike Lennox, our good friend from the Amateur Baseball Association, and we're going to talk about the IHSA with Commissioner Nadig right after these couple of words.
Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube.
Welcome back for Playing for Keeps. I am your host, the voice, Milt Thompson, here on WHMB Channel 40, and Paul Nadig, Commissioner. The Commissioner, anytime you get commissioned and you become the Commissioner, we're talking pretty, what we call in my day, high cotton. We're talking about some big stuff, particularly in some of the shoes that you've been filling. Paul, welcome to our show.
Oh, so thankful to be here. And I've been told the job commissioner entails a lot, but we're still trying to figure that out along the way. And I still get teased among my friends, and they always look at me and say, Paul, they don't know where you're from yet, do they?
Well, maybe you're going to tell them where you're from.
We are.
And how it is you kind of emerged into that commissioner's role.
Sure. You know, I've never had a long-term goal in education. When I started in this business, I wanted to teach kids. And that was my passion. That's what I wanted to do. I got to coach a little basketball along the way. I had a great mentor in my life named Herb McPherson, who taught me that I could do something more than be a kid that grew up in Poseville, Indiana, and work on the farms in the community. But, you know, he said, you need to go play basketball. And I went to play basketball. And then I figured out I needed to be a student too. And learned to do that along the way, and had great 4 years at Eastern Illinois University, and came back and got to teach at Evansville Central High School. And that's what I wanted to do. I had no aspirations to do anything else. But, you know, one thing kind of leads to another. I had a great teaching career, and I became an athletic director at Evansville Central High School, and I found another passion that I didn't know I had. Just finding a way for kids to participate, put their school uniform on with their community's name on it. You know, it's just a time-honored tradition that many of us have gotten to do over the years, and it's so important that continues to this day. But then became chief of staff for the Evansville Vanderbilt School Corporation, and along the way I became a board member for the Indiana High School Athletic Association. And my relationship with that organization goes back 20 years now. I served as a board member for about 15 years, and Commissioner Cox gave me an opportunity to come on staff as an assistant commissioner. didn't anticipate it, and these jobs come open so infrequently that it's just a blessing when you're able to do those things, and I loved it. Commissioner surprised us with an announcement a little over a year ago now, that he was going to retire, and I put my name in the hat, and the board of directors of the association decided it was my turn to put my spin on it, on what we do in education-based athletics.
A lot of people have heard of IHSAA. They don't really understand it. They don't understand what its role is. They don't understand how you get to be on a board of directors, and how are they divided? Are they around the state, or are they self-perpetuating boards? Is it a 501c3, or is it its own corporation? And what's its structure, and how is it put together? Can help us understand it a little bit more when they hear those words.
Certainly. We are actually, the initial IHSA was started in 1903. By Arthur Trester, and it was a desire or a need to put some rules around amateur sport, and also put the word education in front of sport. There were stories of professional athletes playing on high school teams in their local communities, and there was really no regulation. So in 1903 is when the organization started, but then we became incorporated. We're a not-for-profit entity. We're a membership organization. Schools of the state of Indiana can choose to be a member of the association. We have 407 members now. And then we have a governance structure of school personnel. And they represent the size of school, whether they be a 1A school, 2, 3, or 4A school. We have minority representation. We have female representation. We have urban school representation, and we have a private school representation. So we have 19 boards, board members that are elected by the membership of the association. So it truly is an organization that's governed by all. Paul Notting doesn't sit there and make up the rules and decide this is what is good for us today. Those have to be voted upon and approved by our boards. The job that my staff has is to implement the bylaws of the member schools of the association. And that's what we try to do on a daily basis.
So what does Paul Notting do on a daily basis other than administering the staff, but this enormous external customers that you're dealing with, including schools and students and parents and referees and umpires? Tell me, how do you do all of that?
Well, we spend a little time on the phone. We answer a few emails along the way. But the main thing that I look at my job is I have to establish a decision-making structure for the organization. And when we deal with high school students, we have to protect the experience. And the thing that I think about constantly is, how do we protect the experience of all kids? And our job is not to focus on the best student athlete in a school. Those kids are going to be just fine, our student athletes. Our job is to make sure that we're making decisions that are really focused on all kids. The last kid who makes the team, I often say. So I really try to think daily about that and what our decision-making structure, and make sure that our staff, and they do, they understand what our decision-making structure has to be. The other thing that is paramount in what I do is making sure that we are an education entity first. Everybody thinks of the IHSAA as a sports-first entity, and that's not certainly what we do, but we always make sure that we want to keep the word sport in front of the word education in front of sport. And education-based athletics has to be paramount in what we do, or it just doesn't work. It doesn't work, and we will not be able to protect the experience for kids any longer.
Well, Paul, without getting too deep in weeds, an organization of that size and scope has to be supported. What is your business model, if you will? How does it make money, and how does it distribute money, and what other partners do you have in that mix?
Certainly. We're a not-for-profit. We are not supported by any tax dollars by the state of Indiana.
I think that abuses some notions out there.
Some notions are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what our model is, but the majority income comes from state tournament revenue that we offer 22 sports that we offer state championships in. But we also have great sponsors with obviously the Fever and the Pacers and the Colts and Farm Bureau Insurance, and there's a multitude of individuals that believe in the education mission of the association, and they want to sponsor what we do. But that's basically where our income comes from. And what's interesting about Indiana, more so than any other state, we do not charge a membership fee to our schools. We do not charge a dime to participate in our tournaments. And we return annually about $2 million to the membership. All the money that's garnered at the sectional level, first round of the tournament, for boys and girls basketball and for football is kept at the school level. And we are one of the very few state associations in the entire country that is able to return dollars earned during participation, ticket revenue, if you will, back to schools who play. And we're so proud to be able to do that.
We're going to, at some point, have Matt on the show to talk about the foundation, but maybe just mention it as a part of the legacy of Commissioner Cox.
Yeah, phenomenal job by Commissioner Cox having the vision to start the IHSA Foundation. And it's truly a foundation that's set up to further the mission of support of student athletes. We have an Inside Out Coaching Initiative to make sure that we can help train coaches that are entrusted with development of young men and women in our state. We also want to be able to give grants to schools who may not have all the things that they need. And we're working hard to be able to procure dollars, to be able to provide grant opportunities back to schools. And then there's first generation students are students that need help getting to college. And the foundation has sponsored several scholarships, whether it be the Bobby Cox Scholarship Fund or there are the Catos, but we offer several scholarship opportunities for kids. And again, we want to open the door. We want to open the door so the light stays on and kids can see a path to an education. And that's what our foundation is doing a phenomenal job with.
Paul, you mentioned a little earlier kind of comparison to other states and what they have. And we have the National Organization of High School Associations located here in Indianapolis. And I want to understand a little bit more about that. And then I want to talk, when we come back after these short messages here, talk about the pandemic that struck everyone and how it is we were able to function in other states, perhaps not.
Happy to.
We'll be right back here on Playing for Keeps. One moment.
Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube. Playing for Keeps, presented by Jiffy Lube.
Welcome back to Playing for Keeps, and I am your host, the voice, Milt Thompson, right here on WHMB Channel 40. And we're having a nice conversation here with the commissioner of the IHSAA. And fascinating but also bringing into his ministry and his passion for teaching and for children. And you can't get better values than having a leader that has those values, and you're instilling that into the organization.
We certainly try to. It's just so important to understand that you teach for all kids, and that's what we want to be.
Well, I admire it, getting a chance to work within the organization, not directly with the IHSA, but with its foundation, and recognizing that there's more than just a couple of meetings a day, right?
There are.
And to keep a lot of things going on. And the reason why I ask about that financial model, because no matter who we ask about the financial model to, during this pandemic, work stoppages, people working from home, people not working at all, stadiums empty, safety protocols. We talked a couple of weeks ago with Ryan Vaughn about doing the March Madness all in one location, and all the things that anything that could go wrong could possibly go wrong. People are wondering, how did you continue to pull off championships even with a deficit? Tell us about the deficit, and then how it is that you managed to look at other programs and then determine that we can be first movers or the best movers in Indiana.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that, because what Indiana did last year as a state was special. The association, we made a decision early on, and we had planned for the rainy day in years past, and we needed to make sure that we were prepared to keep operations going in the case of a pandemic. We didn't know what it was. We found out what it was. And so the association made the choice to continue operations as we have in the past. We did not, employees have made the commitment to work at the association. We wanted to keep them whole. But the other thing that was important to us is in a time of a limited attendance, we still wanted to keep our schools whole. If they were participating in tournaments, whether it be their travel stipend or their meal stipend, or if they operated a tournament for the association at a loss, we wanted to make sure that we were able to cover those losses. And we were able to do that to the tune of about $1.5 million last year. So the association took on a debt of about $1.5 million last year to make sure that we could keep, my favorite term is keep the light on, but keep our schools whole. We did not want to go back to them and ask for them to come up with dollars that they didn't have in support of association operations. And I'm so thankful that Commissioner Ress and Cato and Cox before me had the vision to set aside some dollars that were able to carry us through our rainy day. Sure. And our rainy day was called COVID-19.
Well, IHSAA catches a cold and everybody else catches a flu or they die.
That's right.
And you don't want your members to find that. I used to have a couple other sports talk shows before, and I listened to others, and they just says, well, I'm not a lawyer, but. Well, so guess what, folks? You'll never hear that from me. I am a lawyer, but talking about the issue, and I'm only going to do this every once in a while, so you don't have to worry about my legalese for long. But during the pandemic, and the reason why schools really had no insurance protection, because there's that clause in all those insurance policies called force majeure. Yes. And you know what does that mean? That means an act of God.
Yes.
Now, can you interpret a pandemic as an act of God? Well, no one knew what to do, so therefore insurance companies were denying claims.
Right.
So if you're not an organization that thinks forward, has that kind of vision, you're going to cause other people to be harmed even more. So I applaud you in your leadership by making that decision. Not a hard decision. Well, maybe we charge everybody a little bit, and maybe we still do that and keep it going. But you didn't cut out any championships.
We did not.
Boys and girls
Boys or girls.
Disabled, and you've got some other specialized programs going on now in terms of flag football. And tell us about some of the other sports that are maybe a-traditional.
I'll be happy to, Milt, but one thing I also tell people all the time, I never want to disrespect the tragedy of COVID-19. Certainly as an organization, we understood that, but we understood early on how important it was to keep kids active. And Indiana, one thing I'm proud of is we're one of the few states that started on time, participated in our state championships on time with a full complement of athletes. We did not modify our structure to reduce the number of athletes that got the experience at the state finals. So that was phenomenal. But we were able to continue with a program that we're so proud of is our Unified program. We're partner athletes and student athletes that may have a mental a struggle in the classroom are able to participate on the field. We do that in football. We just celebrated a football state championship a week and a half ago for Unified flag, and we'll do the same thing this spring, but it's the other half of education. It's students that may have been relegated to a special education classroom, and they didn't get out into the general population and participate on a playing field with their peers. And the Unified program permits that to happen now, and it's just something special that we do in Indiana.
Well, that's a fascinating part of the story that should be heard, and thank you for helping tell that story. Other part of your job, some people don't think are so good. There's been some controversy over a couple items that have been recently reported in the news and what have you, and one being the enforcement of the eligibility rules. Tell us a little bit about where that is and what kind of tweaks and have you been espousing?
Well, our transfer process is widely reported on, and people certainly have an opinion on it. But I think I would remind people that we run an education-first system. We run a system that protects the experience, as we said earlier, for all students. And if we didn't have that, athletics is such a unique thing in our society that it supersedes many other things. In many entities, athletics or participation as an athlete is number one, whether it be, an AAU summer program, the focus is not in the classroom first. It's focused on the participation contest in a game first. Our model is different. It focuses on protecting the experience and participation for all student athletes. And if we don't protect the dream, and we never want to rule a kid ineligible, just not what we want to do. But the fact remains there are some places where student athletes with adult input transfer for athletic-based reasons. And when you have a large metropolitan area, like we have several in the state of Indiana, and there's no transfer rule, we'll quickly have super teams. Teams that can gather, whether they're the smallest or the largest school in an area. And once that starts to happen, we're not going to be able to protect the experience.
A little bit of a slippery slope, wouldn't it be?
It's a slippery slope. And the one thing I remember so well is when I got done playing, say, my junior year in high school. We got beat in the sectional tournament in basketball. But we started dreaming about how much better we could get for the next year right away. And we went back to work with our coaches and our team and our community with the dream to do better the next year. And when we have false teams that are put together based on an athletic prowess rather than an education first prowess, I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to protect the experience any longer. And what we know is, and we'll just say basketball, is going to change in a basketball-rich state.
So integrity is got to be critical relative to the student athlete.
It does.
One other area where there's been a little bit of noise, if you will, and it's about the Trestor Award. That there's been some historical references to Mr. Trestor not being quite as inclusive as one might believe in contemporary times, and some write-ins to change the name to someone who represents more inclusively. Very briefly, just hit on that.
Certainly. Arthur Trestor was the founding commissioner of the association. He worked with the Board of Control. Arthur Trestor sadly died in 1944 of a heart attack, never had any children of his own. But the association initially was set up as an association of public schools in the state of Indiana, and private schools were not admitted. Our schools that had exclusive enrollment, whether it be color or whether it be a religious-based exclusion or inclusion, that's what the association was first founded upon. And you got to remember, the vast majority of schools in the state of Indiana, over 800 at the time, were public schools. There were not very many private schools. And that's what the organization started as. And then in the 1940s, there was actually 1941, there was some legislators got involved, rightfully so. And at that point, the association then opened up to where it did accept private school membership into the association.
In a word, you want the organization going forward to respect all eras, but all people, and have it become more inclusive. Give me your 10-second vision of the future.
You know, my vision of the future is to continue to look for opportunities of expansion for student athletes. We've become, as an example, girls wrestling. We had 2 student athletes that just received Olympic medals. I believe it was 3.
That's the definitive bottom line from Commissioner Nedick. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Playing for Keeps. Come back here next week.